I came home with a bag of groceries and found my daughter chained to our backyard fence, her sketchbook torn, her roses crushed beneath her tipped wheelchair. And standing there, arms crossed and smirking like she just enforced the law of the land, was Cheryl Bixby, the self-declared queen of our cul-de-sac. That was the moment I stopped being just a father and became a man on a mission for justice. Picture this. You move into a charming cul-de-sac in Charlotte, North Carolina, thinking you finally found a peaceful corner of the American dream. A modest home with a wraparound porch, daisy-patterned curtains, and enough space out back for your daughter's wheelchair-accessible garden. You imagine weekends filled with laughter, watercolor paintings, the scent of blooming roses, and maybe a few friendly neighbors waving from across the picket fence. But instead, the welcome wagon is a 60-year-old woman named Cheryl Bixby with a voice like nails on a chalkboard and a clipboard she wields like a weapon. That was our story. I'm Ethan Miles' widower, dad, freelance mechanic, and full-time protector of my daughter Daisy. She's 11 wise beyond her years and sharp as a tack. She has this soft smile that melts stone, and eye for color that could humble Monet, and an obsession with roses. Deep reds, soft pinks, delicate whites, our little front yard became her personal canvas. But Daisy also uses a wheelchair. Born with a spinal cord condition that limits her mobility, she's never let it stop her from chasing joy. Unfortunately, joy was exactly what Cheryl seemed determined to destroy. From the moment we moved in, Cheryl made it clear this wasn't just a neighborhood, it was her kingdom. She lived 3 doors down in a house that looked like a Martha Stewart catalog exploded on it. Manicured to the inch shutters, painted regulation forest green, 2 ceramic bunnies perfectly aligned on the front stoop. She was the head of the so-called Neighborhood Beautification Board, which, near as I could tell, was just her a megaphone and a bunch of HOA bylaws printed in Comic Sans. Our first run-in came the morning after Daisy planted her rose starters along the edge of our walkway. I just stepped out with a mug of coffee when I saw her crouched on the sidewalk, ruler in hand, measuring the distance between the flower bed and the curb, like she was calculating rocket trajectories. "Mr. Miles," she called without looking up, her tone colder than the shade of her oversized sun hat. "Your child's garden encroaches 3.2 inches beyond the permitted planting line." I blinked. "They're just roses," I replied. She picked them out herself. "Said they make the porch look like it's smiling." Cheryl finally stood up, squinting at me like I was a bug on her clipboard. "Rules are what keep neighborhoods civilized," she said. "Beauty must be balanced by order." That was only the beginning. Within days, we received a letter citing excessive floral density, followed by another about unapproved decorative fencing, a pair of tiny wooden trellises Daisy had painted with butterflies. The kicker: Cheryl filed a formal complaint over repetitive wheel track patterns on the communal sidewalk, as if Daisy's wheelchair was some kind of vandal spray can. I tried brushing it off at first. We were new. Maybe this was just her way of maintaining standards. But Cheryl's obsession grew. She'd stand across the street with binoculars during Daisy's painting sessions, muttering into a voice recorder. She left us flyers about wheelchair garden damage, and once even rang our doorbell to hand-deliver a pamphlet titled, "Accessible Doesn't Mean Exempt." I kept my cool for Daisy's sake. She was already dealing with stares at school. She didn't need tension at home. But inside, I was boiling. Then came the day that changed everything. A muggy Saturday afternoon in mid-June, the kind where the air feels thick with tension even before anything goes wrong. I'd run out for groceries, just eggs, milk, a bottle of ginger ale Daisy likes. She stayed behind in the backyard with her sketchbook, working on a painting of the red climbing roses she'd nurtured from sprigs. I was gone for maybe 25 minutes. I pulled into the driveway, the engine still humming, when I heard Daisy's voice. Not calling, not laughing, crying. Soft, scared sobs that seemed to come from the base of the world. I dropped the groceries where I stood and sprinted to the backyard. And what I saw froze my blood. There she was, my daughter, chained to the backyard fence. Not tied, not tangled, chained. A thick, rust-streaked metal chain wrapped around her waist, cinched tight, and looped through the wooden slats. Her sketchbook lay face down in the grass, pages torn. Her roses, those perfect proud flowers, were crushed beneath the wheels of her tipped-over chair. And standing nearby, hands on hips, like she was the mayor of hell, stood Cheryl Bixby. Her lips curled into a smirk that made my skin crawl. "She was on HOA boundary soil," she said flatly. "I had no choice. The garden edge violated zoning code and she refused to move. My hands shook. My heart roared in my chest. I wanted to rip that chain off the fence and toss it at her feet. I wanted to shout, curse, scream until the whole neighborhood came running. But Daisy was watching. Her wide eyes wet, frightened, trusting locked onto mine like a lifeline. I forced my voice calm. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, kneeling beside her. "Daddy's here. I've got you." My fingers fumbled with the old padlock as Cheryl droned on about community guidelines and precedent. It was surreal, like a fever dream with HOA bylaws instead of monsters. I finally got the chain loose and lifted Daisy into my arms, brushing dirt and rose petals from her shirt. She didn't speak, just buried her face into my shoulder. Cheryl, undeterred, actually tried handing me a written citation. "I suggest you remove the trellises by Tuesday," she said, "and those crushed rose bushes may need reporting." I turned to her, my voice flat, deadly. "Get off my property, Cheryl." She blinked, surprised at the sudden ice. "Now!" She huffed, muttered something about consequences, and waddled off, her orthopedic sandals squeaking with each step. I stood there for a long time holding Daisy, her breathing slowing, her fingers still clutching the corner of her sketchbook. The sun dipped lower. The roses lay in ruins. That night, after Daisy fell asleep with a cold compress on her leg and a pillow under her arm, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the chain. I held it in my hands, heavy and stained with rust and something worse. I opened my laptop, logged into my online account, and clicked purchase on a home security camera bundle. If Cheryl wanted to play dirty, then fine. But this time, I was going to have the footage, the proof, the whole damn truth. She thought she was untouchable, just another HOA queen with a clipboard and a superiority complex. But she had crossed a line, and I wasn't just a father anymore. I was about to become her reckoning. That was the night I stopped hoping for peace and started planning for war. That night, after the chain came off, after Daisy finally drifted into an exhausted sleep with dried tear streaks on her cheeks and a crumpled rose sketch pressed to her chest, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the cold links of rusted metal, like they were the bones of something ancient and evil. My hands were still trembling, my mind looping through what-ifs like a broken record. What if I'd taken 10 minutes longer at the store? What if Daisy had panicked and fallen? What if her trust in the world, so delicate, so hard-won, had snapped completely in that moment? The rage I held back earlier burned hotter now, but rage alone wasn't going to protect my daughter. Rage wouldn't stop Cheryl Bixby. So I leaned into what I knew: plans, logic, precision. Before, my life revolved around socket wrenches and school drop-offs. I'd worked aerospace diagnostics. I built fail-safes, redundancies, systems that caught danger before it spiraled. And now I needed a system for justice. I opened my laptop, clicked through reviews, and by sunrise, a discrete set of outdoor cameras were en route, scheduled to arrive in 2 days. I didn't want revenge, I wanted exposure. I wanted the truth caught in high definition, with timestamps and indisputable proof. If Cheryl thought she could get away with terrorizing a child, my child, under the banner of property codes and beautification policies, then I'd show the entire world exactly who she was when she thought no one was watching. The cameras arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, tucked in a plain, brown Amazon box. I spent that evening installing them under the eaves behind the azalea bushes, even inside a hollowed-out birdhouse. One faced the rose garden, one overlooked the backyard. Another pointed straight at the narrow strip of side yard Cheryl often patrolled, like she was on neighborhood SWAT duty. I tested every angle, calibrated every frame. By the time I was done, Daisy rolled up beside me and asked, "Are we making a movie?" I smiled, brushing a wisp of hair from her cheek. "No, sweetheart. We're catching a story that already exists." And sure enough, we didn't have to wait long. The very next morning, just past 6 a.m., I was sipping coffee and scrolling through the security app when a motion alert pinged. I tapped into the feed, and there she was, Cheryl, creeping into our yard in a pastel tracksuit that looked like it hadn't seen a washing machine since the Bush administration. She tiptoed up to Daisy's rose trellises, crouched low, and plucked a bloom right off the vine like she was collecting evidence in a crime scene. Then she pulled a plastic bag from her oversized purse filled with dead leaves and weeds and scattered them along the edge of the flower bed. She took photos, jotted something on a notepad, then dusted off her hands and waddled back across the street like she'd just conducted a righteous crusade. I sat there, jaw clenched, my finger hovering above the record button, even though the system already saved everything. I had her, but this wasn't about one video. No, Cheryl was systematic in her harassment. I needed a pattern, a portfolio. So I waited. 3 days later, another clip. This time she poked around our compost bin with a stick, then poured a cup of what looked like pickle brine into Daisy's watering can. Another time she brought a measuring tape and held it against our mailbox, then took a photo with a zoom lens. But the worst moment was when Daisy, oblivious to the camera and focused on her sunflower sketch, was secretly filmed by Cheryl from behind the azalea hedge. She posted the photo later that day in the HOA Facebook group with the caption, "When does special needs become special treatment? Discuss." I stared at that post, rage crackling in my fingertips. The comments section was a battlefield, half the neighbors defending us, the other half afraid to get involved. That's when I realized it wasn't just us. Cheryl had ruled this neighborhood like a petty tyrant for years. We weren't her first targets, just the newest. But we could be the last. I needed help, good people who weren't afraid to stand up. First stop, Camilla Rivera, our next-door neighbor, baker of the best hibiscus cupcakes east of Texas, and a woman whose side-eye could reduce grown men to ash. She was already halfway through one of her tamales when I showed her the footage. Dios mío, she gasped. She's certifiably loca. She did the same with my front garden last spring, said my snapdragons were emotionally aggressive. She leaned in, eyes gleaming. What's the plan? Next, I called Harold Chen, a soft-spoken retired civil rights attorney who lived at the corner house with the wind chimes and the legendary dandelion patch Cheryl once tried to mow herself. He nodded grimly as he watched the footage on my tablet. She's violating trespass laws at minimum. Maybe even targeted harassment if we show a pattern. Finally, I reached out to Leo Stokes, an old college roommate turned Department of Justice investigator, now semi-retired and very bored in the suburbs of Raleigh. One phone call, a shared Dropbox folder, and Leo was on board. He said, "This woman wants power. Let's give her a spotlight." And just like that, the pieces came together. We weren't going to sue, not yet. We were going to stage a flower festival billed as a cheerful community fundraiser for children with mobility challenges. It would be hosted at the neighborhood park, complete with booths, live music, lemonade stands, and an art station led by Daisy herself. But hidden behind the daisies and daffodils, we'd plant the real showstopper, a video montage edited from my security footage that would make Cheryl infamous in every HOA Facebook group from here to Oregon. Camilla offered to cater mini hibiscus cupcakes shaped like flowers. Harold agreed to draft the permits. Leo helped with scripting the reveal and coached me on how to navigate any legal backlash. We created flyers with watercolor roses, plastered them on mailboxes, passed them out at school pickup lines. But most importantly, we didn't give one to Cheryl, because we knew her. Her ego would sniff out the event all on its own. Sure enough, 3 days before the big day, I bumped into her at the local farmer's market. She tilted her visor, narrowed her eyes, and said, "I hear you're throwing some kind of garden gathering. Must be nice to have time for parties while others maintain standards." I smiled. "Oh, it's nothing fancy. Just a little celebration for the kids. You know, community spirit," she scoffed. "Well, someone will have to ensure it meets HOA protocol. I'll see you there." Hook, line, sinker. The night before the event, I stayed up until 2 a.m. editing the footage into a 6-minute video titled "Beautification or Bullying: The Truth About Cheryl Bixby." I added timestamps, clean transitions, even muted Daisy's soft crying under a piano score so the moment would land like thunder. And at the very end, I included a final shot of Daisy holding her crushed rose, painting her little voice whispering, "Do the flowers get in trouble too?" I stared at the screen, fists clenched, eyes burning. I wasn't just telling our story, I was setting it free. The next morning, I woke Daisy up with a smile and a secret. Today, I said, we're going to bloom. The morning of the flower festival bloomed bright and warm, just as I'd hoped. Dew clung to Daisy's freshly trimmed rose bushes like diamonds. A soft breeze stirred the petals, carrying with it the scent of lavender and cut grass and something else, anticipation. It had been 3 weeks since I installed those cameras, 2 since I caught Cheryl Bixby on film tossing weeds into our yard and creeping like a HOA goblin behind our azaleas. 1 week since the final edit of the expose was completed, backed by Leo's sharp narration and Daisy's quiet courage. And today was the day it all bloomed into something unstoppable. We arrived at the community park at 8 a.m., armed with folding chairs, easels, floral tablecloths, and Camilla's famous hibiscus cupcakes. She'd shaped them like peonies and brought a dozen extra, just in case someone's feelings got hurt. Harold Chen set up a legal advice booth, yes, really right, between the lemonade stand and the kids' painting station, which Daisy proudly manned, wearing a straw hat and a shirt that read, "Grow with Kindness." It was all exactly as we'd envisioned. A cheerful, wholesome celebration to showcase kids with disabilities and their artistic gifts. But tucked beneath every tulip banner and sunflower centerpiece was something far more deliberate. The stage had been assembled beneath the gazebo. A projector screen hung from the wooden beams. Beneath it, a podium, a laptop, and a flash drive labeled "The Truth About Cheryl." I slipped it into my pocket like a key to a kingdom long oppressed, and right on cue she arrived. Cheryl Bixby came stomping into the festival at precisely 10:37 a.m., a time I'd come to recognize as her peak authority hours. She wore a blinding rose print pantsuit and a scowl sharp enough to slice an orchid in half. Her phone was already recording as she approached a balloon arch, her voice nasal and precise. Too close to the sprinkler system. That could be a violation. I watched her spot Camilla's booth raise an eyebrow at the hibiscus arrangement, then glare at Harold's "Know Your Rights" banner like it personally offended her ancestry. But she didn't leave. No, she circled, peered, took notes, just as we expected. She couldn't help herself. Her vanity was the leash, and we'd set the hook with garden twine. As families gathered, Daisy gave painting lessons to kids from all over the neighborhood. She showed a younger girl how to blend watercolors into petal shapes, then wheeled over to help a little boy with muscular dystrophy paint a sunflower with glitter glue. I stood nearby, heart tight with pride and nervous electricity. We were almost there. By noon, the crowd had tripled. Neighbors I hadn't seen in weeks were clapping for the bake-off, laughing at flower-themed trivia, and sipping hibiscus lemonade like we were all one big family again. It was surreal and beautiful. But the best part, every one of them had gathered near the gazebo for the main event, our so-called tribute. I stepped up to the podium, palms damp, heart pounding. Daisy sat just off stage watching with wide, curious eyes. Camilla gave me a thumbs up. Leo leaned against a pillar in his sunglasses, arms crossed like the quiet muscle of justice. I cleared my throat and tapped the mic. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my voice catching for just a second before I grounded it. This festival started as a way to celebrate kids with mobility challenges, but it became something more. It became a way for our community to reclaim something that's been missing: kindness, accountability, and yes, beauty. Not just the kind you grow in the soil, but the kind you plant in each other. The crowd clapped. Even a few who'd once avoided me now nodded. I glanced at Cheryl. She stood near the lemonade table, arms crossed, expression skeptical. Her phone still aimed at me. Before we begin the auction for Daisy's paintings, I continued, "I'd like to share a short video. It's about our neighborhood, about what happens when rules become weapons, and what it looks like when one person decides they're above decency." I clicked the remote. The screen behind me flickered to life. At first, the crowd leaned in with casual interest. Then the footage started. Cheryl at 6:12 a.m. creeping into our backyard. Cheryl dumping weeds onto Daisy's roses. Cheryl pointing her phone at Daisy's painting station while muttering about special treatment. Gasps echoed through the gazebo. Some neighbors covered their mouths. A few murmured, "Oh my God." Then came the final scene, the one that still made my stomach twist. Cheryl standing by the fence, clipboard in hand. Daisy crying, chained. My voice trembling as I freed her. And finally Daisy's whisper, "Do the flowers get in trouble too?" The video ended. Silence. Not a single leaf rustled. I looked up, scanning the crowd. Cheryl's face was ashen. Her phone had dropped to her side. Her mouth opened, then closed. That's not," she began, but Leo stepped forward, voice calm and clear. "We've reviewed the footage. It qualifies as trespassing, harassment, and false imprisonment of a minor. Multiple witnesses, multiple violations. We're prepared to forward this to the proper authorities if necessary." Cheryl took a step back, then another. I was protecting property values," she stammered. "I was maintaining standards. You chained a child to a fence," Camilla cut in, stepping up beside Leo. "You humiliated her in public. You poisoned her flowers. Is that your standard?" The crowd turned. Cheryl looked around, realizing the eyes that once flinched at her clipboard were now glaring back, unified, unwavering. One by one, neighbors began speaking up. She fined me for bird feeders. She made my son cry over a chalk drawing. She reported my marigolds for being too bold. The dam had broken. Cheryl tried to retreat, muttering something about legal retaliation, but no one followed. No one defended. And in that moment, the queen of the cul-de-sac became just another woman in a wilting pantsuit with nowhere to hide. The aftermath moved fast. Within days, the video went viral. Harold's lawyer friends forwarded it to local media. The headline, HOA head accused of chaining disabled child over flowers. Cheryl was removed from her HOA position in an emergency vote. Local authorities launched an investigation. By the end of the week, a court order landed in my mailbox. Cheryl Bixby was required to pay $10,000 in restitution for emotional damages, trespassing, and the destruction of property. I never saw her again. The house 3 doors down eventually went up for sale. The ceramic bunnies disappeared from her stoop overnight. But what mattered most wasn't her exit. It was what came next. I used every cent of that $10,000 to rebuild Daisy's garden. Wider walkways, elevated rose beds, lavender plots with hand-painted signs, and a jasmine trellis that bloomed like forgiveness. We added benches, a little wooden stage, and a standing easel under the pergola where Daisy could teach painting every Saturday. And she did. The first weekend, 5 kids came. The next 10. By summer's end, the Miles Garden Studio had become the heart of the neighborhood. No more fear, no more citations. Just laughter, watercolor, and wildflowers. One evening, I sat beside Daisy on a bench beneath the jasmine. She was painting a hummingbird in mid-flight, tongue poked out in concentration. I looked at her, my brave, brilliant girl, and said, "You know you turned all this into something beautiful." She smiled without looking up. "I didn't," she said. "We did." And she was right. This wasn't just justice. It was transformation. The kind that takes root in silence and blooms in sunlight. So, if you've ever dealt with a tyrant behind a clipboard, if someone's ever tried to crush your peace under the weight of control, remember this: the softest thing in the world can break the hardest. Sometimes justice smells like jasmine, and it grows best when shared. What happened in that quiet Charlotte neighborhood wasn't just about Rose's rules or one woman's obsession with control. It was about something much deeper: dignity, courage, and community. Ethan didn't raise his voice. Daisy didn't fight back with anger. And yet together they exposed a wrong that had lived in silence for far too long. Their story reminds us that sometimes the strongest protest doesn't look like shouting. It looks like showing up, telling the truth, and planting something beautiful where pain once bloomed. In our lives, we may all encounter a Cheryl at some point, a person who abuses authority, hides behind rules, and uses power to belittle or control others. And when that moment comes, it's easy to feel helpless, to shrink, or to walk away. But Ethan's story shows us a better way. Document the truth, gather your allies, and shine a light, because darkness cannot survive where community stands united. Daisy, only 11 years old and navigating the world from a wheelchair, didn't let her situation define her spirit. She didn't stop painting. She didn't stop growing her flowers. And after everything she endured, she chose to share her joy with others, turning her garden into a sanctuary for kids who needed the same reminder: you are not a problem, you are a light. So here's the lesson: when someone tries to make you feel small, fight back with purpose. When someone tries to shame you into silence, respond with truth. And when injustice knocks on your door, answer it not with fists, but with facts, friends, and faith in what's right. To all of you watching this on Us Justice Stories, thank you. Thank you for standing with Ethan and Daisy by simply being here, listening and reflecting. Thank you for believing in justice, not the loud, flashy kind, but the quiet, steady kind that actually changes lives. Your support means everything. And if this story moved you, I ask just one thing: share it. Because someone out there might be facing their own Cheryl right now, thinking they're alone. Let's show them they're not. Let's keep this community growing, just like Daisy's garden. One story, one voice, one act of courage at a time. Until next time, take care of each other. And remember, when you choose compassion over control, truth over fear, and flowers over fists, you're already winning.